Okay guys, I'm going to do a very high level tutorial on how to clean your bait casting reels. We're not going to go super in depth cleaning this thing, getting every little nook and cranny. We're just going to focus on big picture stuff so that you can learn how to clean your own reels starting off very first time you've ever opened a reel. Maybe you're a little nervous, you don't know exactly what you're doing. This video is to help you guys out. So how do we get started? First, you got your reel. Some other things that you'll need is reel oil, reel grease, some form of reel cleaner. This is Ardent Reel Clean. If you have Dawn dish soap, just mix it with some water at home. That's a degreaser. It'll work just fine as well. You're going to need probably a small Phillips screwdriver, and more than likely that's what your bait casting reel is going to use. In some cases you might need a small flathead. So just keep that in mind. I got a little wrench, and then I typically use these dental swabs. Most of you probably don't have that around if this is your first time cleaning a reel, so just use a cotton swab. The reason I like these better is it doesn't leave any lint behind like the cotton swabs do. And then finally just a rag. So that's what we got, and we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a Shimano Corrado 51E. All your bait casting reels might be a little bit different in the disassembly, but overall casting reels work generally the same. But some screws are in different spots, how you remove the side plate and different things like that. There might be some minor differences, so keep that in mind as we go through this. But with this reel, to start out, we're going to remove the side plate here, or it just flips off like that. In a lot of cases with reels, the side plate does come all the way off. In this case, we're just going to leave it hanging like that, and then we'll go ahead and we'll remove the spool, and we'll set that off to the side. A lot of cases, reels have a bearing just on the other side of the spool pin. And if that's the case, get out your reel, just hit it with a tiny little piece of, or a little drop of oil, and set that off to the side, and basically you're done with that. So we'll start disassembling the rest of the reel, and we'll start by removing the handle. So I got a little screw here that's holding on this handle nut cap, so we'll go ahead and we'll get that loose. We'll get that loose, and we'll go ahead and start taking it off. Use my little flathead to get that off completely. There we go. As we start removing parts, I'm going to set them in order so I know the order in which I take stuff out. So I'm going to set things out this way, and then when I start reassembling, I'll just go in opposite direction. Okay. So now I get out my wrench, and I'm going to unscrew this nut here. Alright, set it down. Now the handle is free, and I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Set that down. Alright, next is drag star. So I'm going to unscrew that. Okay, comes right off. There it goes. Got a little spring right here. Take that off. We got a little nut right here that we're going to unscrew. Okay, we'll take that off. Notice that there's a little washer right here, and as we take stuff off, it's also important to remember the direction in which we take things off. So as I took this off, you'll notice a little groove on top on this nut. That's where the spring sits right there. So we have to pay attention to the direction in which we pull parts off the reel now. Okay, so now I got this washer, which was facing in this direction, but we're going to just set that down, keeping in mind which direction that we pulled stuff off. Same goes for the next two washers. These are called spring washers, and they have kind of a I'm not exactly sure how to say this. They're bent in certain directions. These are spring washers, meaning they're shaped like this. And when we tighten down the drag star, they actually flatten like that. So that helps create that drag pressure, and then as you loosen your drag star, they come apart again like that. So you want them to be facing each other. Again, that's just another example of you want to pay attention to the direction in which you are removing these washers and the direction in which you put them back on. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and we'll just remove the spool tension cap. Right now we got access to that, so we'll just move that, or remove that. and I got a little spring right here. I'll go ahead and pull that out, and I'll have access to another bearing right there. Now, I recently cleaned this reel, so I don't need to hit it with another piece of oil or another drop of oil, but you know, if this was, we were actually cleaning it, I'd hit that with a little drop of oil, we'd be done with that piece. Now we got to get this side plate off, and that's just our Phillips screwdriver. Okay, that one's loose. We'll hit this other one right here. Okay, and we're going to take those screws out, and remembering which screw goes where. Okay, I kind of set them in a pattern, so I imagine this reel sitting in front of me like that. So I'm going to set my screw that was in this position, I set it like right there, and this one that's in this position, I put it right here. And so now I kind of have a visual map. I know I'm going to pick up this reel and look at it from the side like that. I look down and say, okay, that one's in that position, this one's in that position. That's how I position my screws. That's what works for me. I'm going to go ahead on this side, and I got another screw right there. Going to go ahead and move that. That one's on the inside. It's a lot higher than the other screw, so when I remove that screw, I'm going to put it up here. So now I know that screw goes on top. That's the highest one. Okay, this whole side plate's going to come right off. Now we've entered the guts of the reel. You'll notice on this side there's a little sleeve right here that a lot of times that comes out when you take off this side plate. That sleeve, it gets stuck in this anti-reverse bearing right there because there's grease in there which sticks to it. Okay, so I removed that that anti-reverse sleeve right there, and we can get a good idea of why you can't reel your reels backwards right now. If I were to insert this sleeve, just to show you, I can't. I can spin this just like I was turning the reel. I can spin this forward, but if I tried to move it backwards, that anti-reverse bearing kicks in, and I can't turn that sleeve backwards. So that's how your anti-reverse bearing works. Just so you guys know. So we'll go ahead and set that off to the side. Same with that bearing or that sleeve. And now we're inside the guts, and here's our main gear. Pulls right out with our hand. Okay, so you got your main gear, and as you look here, we got a washer on top. If I take that, then I see another drag washer right here. Sometimes there's a whole stack of these things, and again, make sure that you're pulling them off in order. And we could start laying them out in the order that we want to put them back in. But if I was going to clean this, which I recently cleaned this reel, so I'm not going to do this now, but you would just disassemble it like that, and we would take our drag grease. My Shimano drag grease is what I use, and I'd put it into these gears, and I'd get it in there nice and clean into all these grooves. I also take some of that grease, and I would hit this drag washer with it. These metal ones I usually don't hit so much, but I might leave a little bit of grease on the top here for where this anti-reverse sleeve goes when we start assembling it back together again. But we'll set that off to the side, and we'll pull out the rest that's available by hand. So this is the pinion gear here, and as we pull this out, we're also pulling out a few other parts. Now we pulled that out, and there's a couple springs here. These are called yoke springs, and we'll pull those out, and now we got the yoke and the pinion gear, which sits right in the middle of that yoke. So we got that apart, and we'll look and see what else we got here. This is a piece that most of your reels are not going to have. Well, let me get to that actually. Sorry. So I'm going to pull out this this metal piece here that's got all these grooves on it, and this is called the ratchet. And at the same time, I'm pulling out a piece on this Shimano reel that's called the dog, and that is basically a clicker for this reel. Most reels don't have it, especially the modern ones. There's not a lot of clicking reels these days, like the Shimano 51E was. Anyways, we got the ratchet, and you'll notice there's another drag washer on top right there. Okay, so now we basically have the reel entirely disassembled. We could go further. Yes, we could remove this front cover here. We could get into here. We could remove the pawl is what it's called, but the pawl makes contact with this worm gear here, and that's what makes this go back and forth along the worm gear there. But we're not going to mess with that today, because like I said, this is beginner level stuff. So this is as far as we're going to go. Now, if I were to get in here and really want to do a good cleaning, I would take this little dental swab, I would get some reel cleaner on it, and I would basically go to town all up in here, and I would get all that old grease out as good as I can. And I would also hit that worm gear too and get as much grease and oil out of there as I can. And same with all these parts that I've removed. I would probably either set them in this reel cleaner to let it soak, or if you want to, you could just dip a dental swab in there and clean it all up real good. Use a rag to dry it off if you like. But it's not real rocket science, you know. Just clean the parts and get them dry. That's your first goal. Clean the parts and get them as dry as possible. Once you do that, then you can start adding grease to all these parts and then start reassembling it. So let's just go ahead and start doing that, pretending like we have everything clean and dry. Again, I'm just going to tell you, just in case you have a reel like this, but I have a bearing right there, so I would hit that with a little bit or a little drop of oil. I also got a bearing in the side plate here. I'd hit that with a drop of oil too. So let's go ahead and let's get this thing reassembled. It starts with the ratchet. Okay, that middle piece goes all on the bottom. We don't need to grease that whatsoever. It doesn't matter what kind of reel you have. Ratchet goes on first. You don't need to grease it. Now I will say the ratchet, most ratchets and a lot of reels these days are not shaped like this. This one, I could probably actually take this and put it upside down and it wouldn't make a whole lot of a difference. Well, with other reels, the direction does matter, so make sure that you know which directions these teeth are pointed if you're going to be removing ratchets. Let me show you something. So if I hit this this lever here, okay, this is a thumb bar. When you turn your handle, it is going to kick this lever here back into place, and that's what re-engages reel. Okay, this lever, that little lever right there. So as you can kind of see how this is working, as I turn the handle, that lever is going to, or this little kind of tooth on this ratchet is going to make contact with this lever, and it's going to push it and re-engage your reel. Okay, so you want to make sure that when you put that ratchet on, if you want to test it, you know, go ahead and push that thumb bar in, and you could turn it and just make sure that your reel re-engages. If it does, you're good to go. Okay, starting with this bottom washer, go ahead and get a thin layer of grease on each side. Excuse me. On each side, put it back on there. Okay. Now with this reel, again, your reel probably doesn't have this, but I got this little dog right there that has to go on at this point, so I put that into place. It goes right there. Next, we'll go ahead and we'll actually go with the main gear next. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. I think it's easier to put on the main gear before I mess with the pinion and the yoke spring. So we'll put the main gear on, and again, if I was actually re-greasing this reel, I'd probably put some grease in the middle of this main gear here, and I would get grease all up in these grooves right there too. Then I would start putting my drag washers back in. Again, you've got a light layer of grease on each side, and then I'm taking this top metal piece and putting that on there. I don't put a lot of grease on there. I don't put any usually, but if I was, I'd put it on the top right there. Okay, we can actually take this anti-reverse sleeve if we wanted to right now and put it into place as well. Now we can put on the pinion gear and the yoke, so we'll get that into place. And pinion gear just goes in like that into our yoke, and we'll go ahead and put that back into place. Okay, so we got that, and now there's two posts here where our yoke springs go, so we'll put that back into place as well. And now we're set for this side cover. So we'll go ahead and we'll put that side cover back on. Okay, and now we're going to screw it all back into place. And I remember, based on my little position that I put my screws on the mat here, I know exactly where I need to reinsert these screws at. So go ahead and get that screwed back in. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and get this little spring back in. Alright, then put this cap back on. Just for the sake of ease, I'm going to go ahead and put my spool in at this time too, but you know, that was one of the first things I did, so you don't have to, but that's the way that I'm going to do it. Now I remember exactly what direction I want my these spring washers back in, so that they're facing each other like we talked about earlier. Okay, we know what position we're putting in this washer here. Same with this nut here. Put our spring back into place right there, and we pull on our drag star. And there we go, we got it into place. Next we got to take our handle, put that into place. If I was actually cleaning this reel, what I typically do is I put a little light layer of grease on this side of the handle and on the top of it as well. Put that into place right there. Go ahead and grab this nut and put that into position. Screw that on. And go ahead and get our handle nut cap. Okay, see if it lines up with our holes there, and I can see it does not, so I'm going to have to tighten this nut a little bit more just to get into the right position. We'll try that right there, see if everything lines up. It's a little bit off yet, just a little bit. Try that right there. Right, that's in position. Final screw. Alright, we got everything back into place. We'll go ahead and we'll tighten down our drag star a little bit, and we'll start by just reeling a little bit slowly, making sure there's no issues. Hit that thumb bar, and we'll spin that spool, make sure it's spinning freely, and then go ahead and start basically giving it a go. Just make sure everything's working right, which in this case everything should be working just fine. So that's pretty much it, guys. You know, it's not rocket science. You start tearing it down, go as far as you feel comfortable doing. You know, grease the gears, hit those bearings with a little bit of oil. You know, just make sure you clean those parts good, dry them up before you hit it with that grease, and then you should be good to go. Thanks a lot, guys. Let me know if you have any questions.